The first time I suspected my wife, Julia, of being unfaithful was after my son Matt's 13th birthday. On my way home from work, I picked up some pictures from the drugstore. Julia wasn't home yet, so I sat down and started looking through them. It had been a wonderful day, and Matt was thrilled by the surprise party we had planned for him. All his friends were there waiting when he arrived. As I flipped through the photos, one picture stood out, a close-up of Matt and my best friend Steve. Steve and I have been friends my entire life. Our kids even call us Uncle. When I looked at Matt and Steve's faces side by side, I noticed something I hadn't before. They had the same black hair, the same green eyes, and similar narrow noses. Their skin tone and facial features matched too. If I had known better, I might have thought Steve was Matt's father. Most of the other photos were just kids enjoying the party, but my attention was drawn to the background of one picture. There was Julia, standing with Steve in what looked like an intimate pose, as if they were about to kiss or had just kissed. I searched through the rest of the photos, trying to find more evidence of them together, but there was nothing else suspicious. I pulled the 2 photos that had caught my attention and tucked them away in a desk drawer in my home office. The similarities between Matt and Steve, combined with the photo of Julia and Steve, didn't prove anything. Still, I started thinking back, trying to remember if there had ever been signs of Julia being unfaithful. Before I could think too much, Julia walked into the front door, kissed me, and headed upstairs to change. It was part of her daily routine after work, and I'd never had a reason to doubt her before. But now, my mind raced with suspicion. I decided to follow her upstairs to see if I could catch any sign of deception. When I entered the bedroom, Julia looked surprised to see me but didn't seem bothered. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" she asked while changing into her house clothes. "Not too bad." I picked up the pictures from Matt's party. They turned out great, but didn't we take too many? 5 rolls of film for one birthday party. I said, we put so much effort into making him believe there wasn't going to be a party, only to surprise him. I wanted to make sure we had enough pictures to remember it. Julia replied with a smile. It was nice to invite all his friends, our family, and even Steve, Mary, and their kids. I said, did she flinch? When I mentioned Steve's name, there was a slight movement. But was it natural, or was it a reaction to me saying his name? Yeah, it was a great party, Julia said. Other than that possible flinch, I didn't get any more clues from her. I decided to keep an eye on her and Steve as much as I could to see if anything suspicious came up. I didn't start with high-tech surveillance tools like audio recorders, video cameras, or phone tapping. Not at first. Instead, I began by tracking her casually. If Julia said she was going somewhere, I would find reasons to call and check if she was really there. A few weeks later, a tragic event occurred. A missing little girl's body was found in the lake. Her family had taken the precaution of doing DNA testing beforehand, so she could be identified if something happened. Julia then brought up the perfect opportunity to address what had been bothering me. John, I think we should do DNA cards for our children too. If something ever happens and they find a body or a part of one, I want to know if it was our child, Julia suggested. You're absolutely right, I said. This girl was missing teeth, and her body was so damaged that normal identification methods didn't work. Having the children's DNA on file is a wise decision. I told Julia I would take our 4 children, Matt, Ashley, Hannah, and Sarah, to get tested and have their DNA put on record with the county. At the family doctor's office, I made my request. So, what's the reason for this, John? Dr. Smith asked. I'd like copies of the tests. Not because I don't trust the county with the information, but because I'd feel safer having copies at home, I said. Of course, John. No problem at all. Many parents do the same, Dr. Smith replied. 2 weeks later, I went out of town for a business trip. During my time away, I visited another doctor's office with the DNA tests in hand, determined to get answers. The woman I lived with for 8 years claims I'm the father of her 4 children and is now demanding child support. I explained to the doctor, I have reasons to believe I'm not the father of one or more of them. I've demanded DNA records from her. But now I need you to confirm how many children I am actually responsible for. It's always unfortunate when someone falsely claims paternity, the doctor said. I've seen many marriages suffer because of this. Are you saying you're not married to this woman anymore? No, ma'am. We broke up 3 years ago. I'm married to someone else now, and all this alimony talk frustrates me, I said. I left the office with the envelope containing the results, but hadn't opened it yet. The closer I got to knowing the truth, the more uncertain I felt about whether I really wanted to find out everything. When I got home on Friday night, I found a note on the table from Julia. It said that she and the kids had gone to her mom's for the weekend. Unable to face an entire weekend of uncertainty, I decided to open the envelope. But first, I calmed my nerves with a glass of scotch. When I saw the results, I immediately poured another and drank it quickly. None of my 4 children were biologically mine. Yet, it was clear they shared the same father. After that realization and a strong drink, I passed out around 4 a.m. When I woke up, I started thinking about my next steps. I suspected that Steve was the father, but I needed certainty. That's when I decided to go high-tech. There was a store not far from my house that specialized in surveillance equipment. On Saturday morning, I went there and bought everything I needed. I installed tiny motion-activated cameras throughout the house and sound recorders. I also attached tracking devices to Julia's car and Steve's SUV, so I could always know where they were. All the data was set to be sent to a computer in the basement, which I could access remotely from my laptop. On Saturday afternoon, I discreetly installed the tracking device on Steve's SUV when he came by to pick me up, as I had called him and told him Julia would be out of town for the weekend. At least I knew he wouldn't be with her that weekend. I spent most of Sunday morning going through Julia's belongings for any incriminating evidence. As far as I knew, she didn't keep a diary or notes, and her computer appeared clean. However, in the back of her closet, I found some lingerie I'd never seen before, another piece of circumstantial evidence. When Julia came home with the kids on Sunday night, I greeted them with a big hug. That night, as we lay in bed, Julia surprised me. "John, don't worry too much, but I think I'm pregnant," she said. "Pregnant?" I asked. "Yeah, I think so. I plan to see the doctor tomorrow to confirm, but I have a feeling," Julia said. At that moment, I decided I needed to get a fertility test as well. Julia and I had tried for a long time before she got pregnant with Matt. I had taken time off work and nursed her through each pregnancy. It had been difficult for us to conceive each of our 4 children, so this sudden pregnancy seemed suspicious. On Monday, I drove to a clinic in a neighboring town where no one knew me. I took the fertility test and waited for the results. My sperm count was above average, yet another fact that didn't add up. With this new information, I rushed back to work and accessed the data from the surveillance equipment. The tracking devices showed that Steve had left work and driven to a hotel on the east side of town. Julia's car had been at the doctor's office and then went to the same hotel. That night, Julia was thrilled and announced that we were going to have another child. I was holding back as hard as I could from confronting Julia and exposing everything I had discovered. Over the next few weeks, I collected even more evidence and realized that Julia and Steve had settled into a predictable routine. They would meet for extended lunches at the hotel on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always booking the same room. I had photos of them entering and leaving the room, and there was no need to see what happened inside. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, they would meet at our house and use the guest bedroom. The more I uncovered, the harder it became to hold back my anger. After observing them for 2 months, I recorded a phone conversation that pushed me over the edge. "Hey, are you comfortable talking?" Steve asked. "Yeah, John's playing golf, and the kids are at their friends' houses," Julia replied. "I've been worried about John lately. He's been acting strange. Do you think he could have found out?" Steve asked. "He hasn't figured out anything in years. Why would he now?" Julia laughed. And Matt is becoming more like you every day. So what? John thinks I'm the perfect wife. He'll never suspect I'm cheating on him. And he'll never believe that for all 15 years, I've made sure to only have children with you, not him, Julia said. I'm still not sure I'm okay with that, Steve said. Take it back now, or you'll never touch me again, Julia warned. Okay, I take it back. I can't wait until Monday, Steve replied. Monday won't work. I have a lunch meeting. It's important, so Tuesday, we'll need a long lunch, Julia said. What time should I be there? Steve asked. Around 11, Julia replied. See you then, Steve concluded. I listened to this conversation on Sunday and made my decision. On Monday, I gathered all my evidence and went to see an attorney to start divorce proceedings based on adultery. So, John, what grounds for divorce are you choosing? Dave, the attorney, asked. Marital infidelity, I replied. Are you sure? That's difficult to prove in this state, Dave cautioned. Well, maybe you can tell me if this is enough. Pictures of my wife and her lover entering a hotel room, videos of them together, recorded phone conversations detailing their affair, including one where my wife admits to deliberately having children with him instead of me, and DNA tests showing that none of the 4 children I'm raising are mine. Is that enough? I asked. Yes, that's more than enough. I'll send your wife the divorce papers right away, Dave said. Can I choose when and where she receives the papers? I asked. What do you mean? Dave questioned. Tomorrow at 11, she's supposed to meet her lover at our house. Can we arrange for her to be served there, say at 11:30 or 11:45? Handing her the papers as she commits adultery would be powerful evidence, I suggested. That's an interesting idea. And yes, that's possible, Dave said. Would it be legal to invite her parents, her sisters, a few friends, her lover's wife, and maybe even their bosses? I asked. I see you're looking for a little revenge. If you tell them it's a surprise party for the new baby, that should be fine, Dave replied with a smirk. And they don't know in advance what they're going to see? That should be fine, Dave said. Excellent, I concluded, after leaving the lawyer's office. I made a few phone calls and invited everyone except Mary to come to the surprise party in Julia's honor. If I invited Mary, she might tip Steve off, and he wouldn't show up. At 10:45 Tuesday morning, I called Mary and asked her to meet me at the house for a chat. Everyone else waited quietly in the yard. Once the entire group had gathered, I told them that Julia was resting inside and that we would sneak in to surprise her. Dave stood by with the divorce papers in hand. We crept into the house unnoticed and made our way to the guest bedroom. I flung the door open and we all yelled, "Surprise!" The room fell silent, filled with shocked faces. Julia's family shouted at her. Mary screamed at Steve, and Julia turned her anger on me. Steve tried to gather his clothes and flee, but his boss blocked the door and informed him of his dismissal. Amidst the chaos, Dave walked calmly over to Julia, who sat on the bed wrapped in a sheet, sobbing uncontrollably. Julia Davis, you are hereby served with these divorce papers filed by your husband, John Davis, Dave said, his voice cold and mechanical. He is seeking a divorce on the grounds of adultery. Mr. Davis is not seeking custody of the 4 children already born, or the child you are carrying, as DNA tests have confirmed that he is not their biological father. Additionally, a recorded phone conversation between you and Steve Wilson shows that you intentionally excluded Mr. Davis from fatherhood to become pregnant by your lover. Mr. Davis is claiming 90% of the entire estate. A court date will be set unless you agree to these terms. Good day. Dave handed the papers to Julia and left. Both Julia and Steve lost their jobs. Steve's marriage to Mary ended in divorce. Julia's family, who had always liked me, disowned her. Though I did not get the full 90% of the estate in the divorce, I settled for 75%. Additionally, I won compensation from Steve in a separate lawsuit for preventing me from having children. I had loved Julia with all my heart. If I had acted on my suspicions earlier, it would have shattered me. But now, knowing the full extent of her betrayal, it was easier to cut her out of my life. I still see her around town sometimes, and each time she tries to apologize. But I don't want to hear it. She cheated on me for years, deliberately kept me from fatherhood so she could have Steve's children, and made me believe they were mine. If it weren't for the depth of love I once had for her, I might have wished her harm. But despite everything, the memories of the good times remain. The kids were confused when they learned that Uncle Steve was their father and their cousins were actually half-siblings. They spent a lot of time in counseling because of this, and I regret the pain it caused them. In the end, Julia's scheme backfired. She wanted Steve's children instead of mine, and now she must live with them resenting her for what she did. They still call me Daddy when they see me,